Um, I can't see myself here. Oh, okay. There I am.
You see you? You're there.
Oh, we're recording?
We're recording. Get going.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our this next episode here of Between Two Teachers. And my name is Consuelo Lara, and we are coming from the sacred lands of...
There, it's in front of you now. Look, here it is. The Chochenyo, Karkin, Ohlone peoples. People who lived in this part of the world many, many years ago. And I'm going to read the Inla Tesh saying that was brought up that I read last time, but I think it is such a beautiful saying that I wanted to bring it up and read it again. Let's see if I can actually do that. You are my other me. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. That is the Mayan saying, the Mayan poem that is used to center people to think about how we really are all one. I'm Madeline Cronenberg, and I wanted to show you something I added in here last week, and it's just that goes along with the theme that we're talking about, the indigenous people. And the folks on the peninsula have something called the Peninsula Open Space Trust, which is doing a weekly webinar on the indigenous people of the peninsula, which is such a timely thing, I think, for us right now, and certainly for those of us who are aware of the Native connection and talk about it. So it's a weekly webinar. It's worth your time. You don't have to be there at a certain time. I've got the link to the YouTube channel that it's on. You can just click on and watch it anytime, or schedule your life to watch it at noon every Friday, because it's on at noon every Friday is when they do it. I added a few things in here this week. If you click on here, let's see if this works. This is our George Floyd information, and it just has to do with what's happened in the Bay Area and resources for all of us around how to take what's happened in Mr. Floyd's life and bring it into our life. Now, I don't know what is happening here. Oh, how interesting. See what happened? I said Mr. Floyd's life, and that brought something up from the internet. But we're getting rid of it. I don't know what that was. And the other thing I just wanted to point out that I have in here is something from a group called Dignity in Schools. And Dignity in Schools has this list of demands, well, they are demands that they have come up with to respond to everything that's happened in the streets. So we will be talking about dignity in schools on a regular basis here. And I just want to call out a couple of them, because I think some of them really are easier and the kind of thing that governments can respond to. And I think the easiest one to respond, one of them that West Contra Costa has already, and that's on everybody on many different agendas, is to eliminate the SROs. So I think that's underway throughout the United States. Just like the whole conversation about how policing is organized and how we're redirecting funds for the issues that the police deal with, so that we can bring in more social workers, more social workers who are trained to work in the field and could go out to calls that need social work experience and the experience of mental health providers. And what that will do is it'll refocus the police into to be a smaller organization. The other thing is to demilitarize the police, and then still have them there for the issues that we really do need the police to cover. right? I mean, it has to be done. And this is the moment it is being done because the United States is now seeing it. So UTR did a very good job. They are on it for educators for Black Lives. And I think educators have to, most educators in the United States are white women. That is a fact. And that is a fact in districts that are predominantly minority districts. You know, where it wasn't a fact in New Orleans before the storm. But it became a fact after the storm, when it became all charterized.
Yeah.
Before the storm in New Orleans, the middle class, one of the best middle class jobs and that many African American professionals had was in education in New Orleans for years and years. But that all got washed away by Katrina. So that's a story in itself. That's another whole story. But I think that it's important that we understand what educators need to do. There's lots and lots that educators need to do. And there are lots of, this is the moment that people are doing it. And in terms of, you know, what we're doing when we're talking about coming back to the new year, what we have to do is understand that our teachers, so here you have most of your teachers are white women, who they are, the way it worked out. Because there was, of course, no other jobs for white women to have. There was a period in time, the reason there's so many older white women is that in the 50s and 60s, you were very limited as to what you could be. You could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, or you could be I don't know what else you could be. You could be mostly a teacher and a nurse. That's it. There weren't a lot of other things that women were becoming because they weren't becoming, all of the other professional schools were shut off to them.
Be a nanny or something like that.
You could be a nanny, you could be a waitress, I mean, you could, you know, but the idea of going into the other professions really only started much later than that. So you're older, you have many more veteran teachers who are female, many more. It was just the way it went. Anyway, we have to, you know, everyone needs to now grow and take a look at how it is they've participated in our society and what that means about their pedagogy. I have a thing in here on abolitionist, anti-racist pedagogy, which is very different than teaching people to be tolerant, because that's a whole different perspective. And it requires everyone, particularly white teachers, to sit down and think about the strategies they've used and where they've come from. Because the idea is we thought we were coming from the middle. Well, we weren't. We were coming from a white male perspective. Because that was the only perspective there was. That was it. It was the dominant perspective of our society, but it was at the expense of everybody who wasn't a white male. And that's fact. Yeah. And we know that. There's like, that's not even an opinion. That's a fact.
What else you got?
So, so that's in here. I think it's important that we talk about understanding the pedagogy, looking at it now that there's all sorts of different terminology for it. It's anti-racist pedagogy, abolitionist pedagogy, right? And both of those terms, what I think is important about both of them is that they call it out. We're not, and that's what we need to do. We need to not try to soften this. We need to call it out for what it is so that people can be aware of all of us can be aware of what we're doing as we do it and catch ourselves and look at ourselves. So there's that.
Good. That's true. It's a different time. You know, people are saying this is different. This is a very different. Lots of times there have been protests and there have been, you know, things that happened that were horrible, and then it goes back to, but things are really changing. And it is, I'm glad you bring those up, because it is the responsibility of white people to get together and educate themselves about.
Absolutely.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing that they are, and that's what they need to be doing.
There has never been the conversation. I mean, I won't say there's never been. You know, in other organizations, League of Women Voters is a prime example, and I'm really familiar with them. Over the past several years before this, they took it on. And they were a group of white women, and they have a whole history around exclusion of African-American non-white women. Whole history around it that they had to come to terms with, and they're still coming to terms with. But that's a conversation, at least they have started it. So for those, this is sort of an extension of different groups, you know, isolated, siloed groups around the United States who have started this work. But now it's really been elevated. So now it's a national conversation.
In our schools, we need to identify and call out those policies that we've just taken for granted that are actually systemic racism.
Yeah.
Have been really called out.
Yeah.
And for me, like standardized testing.
Absolutely. That is like number one right now. That has been used as a weapon. It's a weapon against teachers. It's a weapon against children. And it's a weapon against an entire system that the purpose of the test is to show what you didn't know. Let's call it out. Let's take the numbers. And in some cities, they publish the tests. They were publishing the tests of, New York City did this. They published the tests and connected them to their teachers. So you knew who all the teachers were whose children had low marks on their tests.
Yeah. And so it was used as a tool to label and then sort out. Exactly. These people will be the workers. These people will go to college. Tracking, that's what it was used for as well. But it stigmatizes children. It harms them. It damages self-esteem. They're never accurate. It's used against students. It used to not put them in GATE programs, but to put them in lower tracks. And it just does horrible things. Segregates.
It absolutely maintains the status quo. It totally does that, right? And that's its purpose. In the end, that is its purpose. It's not there to serve the educational needs, the growth needs, the social emotional needs of anybody. Yeah. Except the testing company that's making a lot of money off of it. And we don't need that. They don't need to have they can find their emotional needs some other way. They are doing this by really hurting our families and our children.
What it does for teachers, against teachers.
Absolutely. It's against teachers.
Yes, lots of times teachers leave the profession. There was a time when they wanted to tie salaries to test results. And then you only have to teach test prep. It hurts the high quality of teaching if all you're doing is teaching to the test. I remember the gradual, that's all I was doing by the time I retired. And you feel punished, and it just creates low job satisfaction, and it deprofessionalizes our profession. So
totally, it completely does, right? It makes it a mechanical process to learn how, and these are tests that basically are fill in the dot, right? There's all of this low quality thinking that they're measuring. That's the other thing. It's not like we're measuring your ability to be a scientist. We're measuring very low quality thinking. So the next little thing I have in here is in this school admissions process. In New York City, which I follow because I'm a New Yorker, they've stopped. The COVID-19 has made it impossible for them to give the tests that they normally give to decide which middle school, which secondary school, middle school and or high school that you get to go to. And this is a big deal in New York, a big deal. So if you're interested in just knowing, this is yet another time that it says here, school admissions process, which is testing that caused segregation, fell apart in weeks. And people had fought about it for years, but now it didn't matter. You can't give the test. It's impossible. And this is the gift. If there's any gift from this from this incredible devastation of COVID-19, it's all of the opportunities to really make changes on things that were not serving people. And this is one of them. I added in here the National Teacher Plan for Education. I've got some of the other plans in here. What is useful is to see that the teachers have, surprisingly, of course, an interest in their children. And not in, and this is the whole thing. If the plan you come up with, the first thing you can think of is, well, the first thing we're going to do is give them a test. You have to rethink what you're looking at children and teachers, your entire community that has been traumatized by having to never even get to say goodbye to each other, being moved onto a screen that is totally something that no one was prepared for. And then if your responses, and when you come back, you're going to be with some stranger and a peculiar, weird set of time frames that fit us somehow. And then you're going to get tested so we can see how badly you lost, right? We're testing you to see how bad you are now. Instead of saying, we're not going to do a test at all. We're not doing any testing. We want to see how you're doing. We want to connect with you. We want to rebuild your social, emotional, respond to the trauma that you've had and rebuild the relationships that have been broken. And I just think that has got to be what they do. In the schools, when you look at these plans about coming back, the schools that are the private schools that people are paying thousands and thousands of dollars to send their children to, they're not thinking of tests. They're thinking about rebuilding their children. They're thinking about measuring how children are learning and how they're doing with multiple measures, not with some little trusty test that you can put the score up on a dashboard. If somebody's talking about a dashboard, what they're doing is they're commoditizing your child. The minute you hear that, that's a tip off, right? Oh, really? That is not the direction we want to go. CSBA, that's the California School Boards Association, they have one too. Theirs, of course, has a lot to do with money because they were worried about how much money they're going to get, and then worried about facilities, and that's sort of been their focus. The AFT is the American Federation of Teachers, and the first thing that they wrote, which I have in here, is what the financial implications. And what they're saying is there needs to be enough money brought back to do a major effort to try to rebuild our education system after this incredible catastrophe that we have gone through. And it is emergency education. This is not the way we should be set up to do it in the future. This is being done in an emergency because people are afraid that other people, that they will catch a disease or their families will, and people will die. That's what we're talking about here. I mean, if we had said this like 6 months ago, people wouldn't believe it, but here we are. Yeah. So go ahead.
And like you said, they can't come back and then have everybody just keep taking tests and tests and tests. What they do need to do is assess what the children have been going through all this time.
Right.
The harmful effects of the pandemic by calling the students, they need to be, I know you can't do home visits at this time, but reaching out to them, because students and their families they've been facing evictions, utility shutoffs, homelessness. Before COVID, we were 72% free and reduced lunch. So the trauma, we need to provide that health care. We need to provide mental health services continually. And I think we need to provide some free childcare.
Yes, there's no question we need to do that. I mean, and what is going to happen with childcare? That's a whole other issue that I know they're thinking about it, but I haven't heard any real solutions. What are the solutions? If they're going to say you're at home, well, you can only be at home if your parents are at home. And your parents can only be at home if they can be at home and not have to be producing a salary to be able to pay for their children.
You know how we've developed these partnerships around the food with the food banks? We could do the same thing when it comes to childcare. So we could partner with some of the other agencies that are out there, and we could figure this out. But our families need this. They have to work.
There has to be an intentionality around it. That's what we need. And this is the time when we, honest to God, need to put in universal pre-K.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm putting that on our list. That is because that is something, this is the moment for it. If you were ever going to do it, and Governor Newsom, that's exactly, he wanted to do it. Well, he needs to pull his money out and put it down for that, because that's the beginning of childcare. The universal pre-K, then you have a system. Then you have a system. So the state hasn't decided yet how much money we're going to get. And that's because Governor Newsom and the legislature don't agree. But in the end, he will win because the system is set up for him to win. But we just haven't really heard where he's going to land on exactly how much he's going to give the districts, each district, or whether or not his idea so far has been to focus more on districts that have higher need children. And unclear where he will land, but we'll know in a couple of weeks because he's going to make up his mind. And he wants to know what he's getting from Washington too. And that's all of those are moving parts that people don't know. But either way, it won't be enough. There won't be money to put nurses in these schools. There's not going to be enough money. There just is not going to be enough. And that's why we still have our actions around schools and communities first. And also for other funding measures like parcel taxes.
Yep.
People shouldn't be afraid to put parcel taxes on.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to need all that. Oh my gosh, yes, definitely. Okay, do we have anything?
Okay, now for you can talk about this. Is you had the Healthy Richmond plan come before you, right? With the conversation around the SROs.
Yes, everybody's got a plan. Everybody what to do with the money, and
yes, how to spend the money.
It's free money, and it's just laying around, and we can write you a check. I mean,
yeah,
I just think it's really selfish of people to think, well, we put it here, put it there. I kind of feel like if it comes from a certain site where the SROs were, and if we stop paying the salaries, then that money should go to that site and their in-house programs that address these issues. The CSOs, those are the campus security officers, our SCOWs, which are the school community outreach workers, our health centers that have mental health providers in there. We've got this stuff there. That's where this money, it's not
right.
money, it's not extra. It's money that we need to use. And then for preventative, we need to make sure we have those programs in place like BAP, like Bay Area Peacekeepers. They really are effective programs, and we should have those in each of our high schools, I believe. So, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we have these people out there just fighting over this, making all these demands on this money, and they're motivated by the charter influences and go public, and that's where that comes from. So I'm just going to call that out, because I know that that's true. So what else do we want to do? How about, should we talk about the demands of the dignity in schools?
Yeah, sure. You want to start with them?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Actually, maybe we
pull up the list.
What do you want to do?
Well, I did want to just say here, this next one, in privatization, I put 2 articles in here about privatization. And this one really is how the idea of a shock of disaster capitalism, right? And how many people, especially in education, because that's what we're talking about, are taking advantage. I mean, they're privatizers, right? And that includes the technology companies. I mean, especially the technology companies now, right? Because they are all, this is their opportunity to make a fortune, and they're all trying to do it.
Yep. They would love it to see us all go completely online. They'd be rich.
Yes,
Go all
yes.
on. That's what they want.
And they're saying that. I mean, that's the other, great. No, it's a great idea. No, it's not such a great idea.
And that's why we have to make sure people understand this is an emergency.
Yeah.
This is not the way it's going to be. We're going to come back. This is not normal. It's an emergency. That's what we're doing.
So here are the list. This is the list. Here, let me show you. She said it's hard to read it from here. So I've got it on here, and I've got the link to it. Here, this is it, but it's hard to read, but I have it over here so I can read it. The first one, they have 9 demands, and they're talking about schooling during COVID-19. And the first one is to redress the civil rights harms in emergency education, which is what we have now. This is emergency education. Distance learning that is being done by people who never thought they were going to teach it, who had no idea or plan, and then the next day they were told, now for the next 13 weeks you're going to do distance learning. That's an emergency, flat out emergency. There's no way around it that it wasn't. That's number one. Number 2 is to remove all the SROs and police from schools. Some places have done that. A lot of places are in the process of doing that. Number 3 is ensure school families' basic needs are met for food, housing, water, and medical care. And those are the community schools issues, right? And that's what we're doing now by feeding our families. But we don't have the extra money. This whole issue about, do we have money to even do that? Yeah. But we decided years ago, West Contra Costa decided years ago that its job was to feed its families all year round. So that's not new to this district. We've always done that. And we, go ahead.
Child care for the essential workers as well. Yeah.
Yes.
In our schools.
Exactly. Redress the civil rights harms impacting students with disabilities. Totally overlooked group, right? Really important to continue to serve them. Restore access to school nursing and mental health services. We need to do more than restore it. Some of us don't even have it. So we need to expand and create access to school nursing and mental health services.
Yeah, our health clinics need to be.
Yeah. Equitable, transparent school district governance. Well, that would be not having charter schools, right? Where you have no transparency or little transparency. But equitable, what they're talking about is you should be able to know who's benefiting from what contract. That should be public information. The district should make it available to people, and that is fair. People should at least know in public sessions how you're voting to spend money.
And it should not be the same 30 parents who were trained by Go Public. The same, it needs to be all of our parents.
That's right. The public needs to understand how important this really is. The next one, a massive, I like that word, massive post-COVID-19 education recovery package. And that is really what is needed, where people, where our families are given the kinds of support, the mental health support that families need as a family. People have lost their jobs, people have lost family members. There are many people who had the disease who have not recovered and will never fully recover. It's a very, very tragic circumstance, but there are many, many issues regarding recovering from this.
Yeah, making sure we're in front of that. We know what's happening with that. And number 8.
Number 8 is data reporting and monitoring on racial harm and risk associated with emergency education. So emergency education is not the same for everybody. That's the big thing. Emergency education it works if you have great internet at home and you have a family members who can give you the time and the space to get on your computer. And maybe it works then. Even in the best of circumstances, there are many children to work for. And in our district, there are over 700 children who never logged on at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just take that, and remember, the thing about us was that we were ahead of the curve. We had equipment. We had worked for years to close the digital divide. There are districts that were nowhere close to what we had done. They hadn't passed a bond measure to buy all this equipment. They had to like start from scratch.
Yep. And this one, number 8, it really addresses the disparities between with the, you know, the racial, the digital divide type of thing. So,
Totally. And so, you know, the honest to God truth with the digital divide is the computers are now the equivalent of books. You should, just like the district would buy books for children in public school, everybody needs to be able to get online. And the other part of that is there needs to be internet accessibility for everybody. That's just where we need to be.
well, and that's number 9.
Choice, because we can do it. There's the ability to do it. It's just a choice of whether or not you do it.
Number 9 here, statewide free high speed.
There it is.
Broadband and hotspots. That's number 9. Those are the demands.
Right. So those are the demands, and every one of those those are the demands that will help bring dignity to our schools. And notice there's nothing on here about more testing. Oh, let's have some more. No. Number 10 is no testing. That's what I would put. That's the one they missed. Number 10 is the way you ensure this is you don't have our teachers and our children be slaves to tests. No, that whole system of assessment needs to be completely rethought. And we need to come back to where we can do multiple measures and children are able to show what they've learned and not have to try to be beaten up by somebody's test.
Yep. You got anything else?
That's it for them. Then the only other thing, I had a couple of 2 take action items, maybe 3. First one is still the ACA, which is not, the ACA is to restore affirmative action, ACA 5. If you go on here where it says Opportunity for All Coalition, right here, that will allow you to sign a letter and let the folks in Sacramento know that you support the repeal of Prop 209 and you support affirmative action in the state of California. This one is to defund the Contra Costa sheriff. And if anybody needed that, it's him. So that's from ACE. And oh, there's a couple more. This one is that calls out the fact that the charter schools applied for the PPE and did the double dipping. And so this is from the Network for Public Education. And if you want, these are very easy ways to take action, but it really does make a difference to do it and to inform yourself and to share it with your networks.
Do some research on that and find out which schools in our district actually double dipped with the.
Oh, I think they all did.
So
they were totally. They were all maybe not Manzanita, but I don't even know. Maybe they did. They were all encouraged by the national charter school leadership to do it.
Just to see how much did they get?
Well, we can find that out. Find out how much they got. But A Method, I think, got $2 million. Yeah. So the way we can look and see if we can find it, and then we can publish the list because it's supposed to be in their minutes, but you have to be transparent and good at your minutes for that to happen. And then this one is the folks from the Network for Public Education have a weekly podcast. And that's what this is. It's called Talk Out of School. And this particular one was about those funds and how they were used, and about institutional racism in education, which is why I put that in there. And I put a list of the where to see the candidate interviews because it's getting to be school board season, and the school board candidate. There were some school board candidate interviews that were conducted by the labor groups in West Contra Costa, and that is the link to those. That's that. So the shout out, I had some shout outs. My big shout out is to, okay, the first one is to Bettina Love, who teaches on abolitionist teaching. And her materials are really powerful, and I absolutely suggest to you that you take a look at that if you really want to understand what abolitionist teaching is. And the other two are for Father's Day because they're dad things. The first one, bring the other one in here. Yeah, the first one is a Korematsu dad who started a group in December, just last December, to do inventions at Korematsu Middle School. Just a club, basically. It's a club. He started a nonprofit, but basically it was a club. And the kids in his club won a contest. They won the statewide contest, and now they're going to go to the nationals, right? So that's a shout out to him, to the Korematsu dad, Mr. Srinivasan. And I think it's the dad. It could be the mom. So it's dad or mom. Yeah. Mr. or Ms. Srinivasan, who started it. And this one I know is a dad. So this is a shout out for Father's Day. This is a guy who created a YouTube channel called Dadvice, for everything you need to know how to do, and say, Dad, how do I? And Dad teaches you how to do it. Right? And that's the ultimate Father's Day YouTube channel, right? Somebody who said he didn't have a dad when he grew up, so he became dad to everybody on YouTube.
Yeah, great.
So that's that. And I don't think we don't have a joke this week because we're doing this on a different day.
I have one. I have a joke.
Okay, you have one. Excellent.
All right. Here's the math teacher. She says, I have 5 bottles in one hand and 5 bottles in the other hand. What do I have in total? And the student says, a drinking problem.
Oh, a good teacher joke. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So thank you all. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And remember to, here it is. Now this is in front of us to remember, like, subscribe, and share.
Okay, so I'm leaving from the Northern Lights over here.
Yes, you are on the Northern Lights. Well, actually, I have the Northern Lights here on this back of my, that's very funny. We have a lot of Northern Lights going on, but you're from the Northern Lights, and I'm at work. I am obviously someone who's at work. But let me turn off our video. No, that's not it. Bye-bye.
Okay.